So I would like to introduce you to our moderator, and the woman that kicked us off in 2016 wouldn't be here tonight if it weren't for Elly Searle. So at the time that we met Elly, she was a senior UX writer at Nordstrom.com. Mm-hmm. And this is after coming out of the University of Washington's Human-Centered Design and Engineering program, which is superb. And so she was at Nordstrom, came up through those ranks, and now is the head of content strategy at CrowdStrike. So deserving of every accolade that you can throw her way. And I apologize for cutting you off.
Oh, no, that's totally fine. Yeah, just real briefly. Yeah, as Larry mentioned, 6 years ago, when I was at Nordstrom, I was like, you know, we need to build our team. We need more UX writers, and people aren't getting trained how to be UX writers. And so Torrey and I put our heads together and said, Larry, can we teach people? And he said yes. And it was fantastic. I have definitely hired people who have taken even just that 5-week class, and it's been great at how well it sets people up for success. So I'm a big fan of SVC in general, and always happy to help out. So, and my privilege tonight is to be the moderator of this panel. As you know, tonight we're gonna, try to talk you through just what all are the things that happen in, job-wise, roles and responsibility-wise in the user experience content field. We'll make sure we get you some info on what kind of entry-level jobs are available, and give you some ideas about how to prepare for that content, your first content job, and maybe even have people here talk about what they hope to see in their candidates, so you get an insider's perspective. So to share all this wisdom with us, I will take you through our panel. First off, I will introduce Scott Kubie, who does some workshops at SVC and lots of other things that I will let him tell you about.
Thanks, Elly. Hi, everyone. Again, Scott Kubie. I teach content strategy sometimes for SVC and others. I do a lot of talks and workshops in this space. Some of you may know me from my UX writing events newsletter, and as my fellow panelists reminded me in our preparations, I also wrote a book, which is called Writing for Designers, which is, thank you for the visual aid, Larry, which is a book kind of focused on the process side of getting the writing done for design projects. I ended up, by virtue of having been in this space for 11, 12 years now, and being a public figure through my conference work, I just have had at this point hundreds of conversations with people about navigating their UX content careers. So hopefully I can bring some of that wisdom to bear in the panel tonight.
Great. And next up, we have Torrey Podmajersky, we've already told a little bit about her connection with SVC, but please tell us more about what you're up to, Torrey.
Thank you, Elly. I'm a UX writer at Google. I'm a staff UX writer there, and I manage a small UX writing and content conversation design team there. And I wrote a book called Strategic Writing for UX. And thank you, Larry. Thank you, Ariel.
Anybody else?
And yeah, that's me. And I'm not speaking on behalf of Google, but I am happy to answer questions.
Yeah. And next up, we have Cortney Kimoto, who has also taught the UX Writing Fundamentals class for SVC.
Yep. Hi, all. I'm Cortney. I'm currently a lead content designer at FAIR. I've been there about 4 months now. I've been in some kind of writing role in the tech industry for about a decade now. I actually started as a technical writer way back at Yahoo in the IT department. And then I made my way to Meta and then Airbnb and now at FAIR. So yeah, lots of different experiences, different sized companies and teams. So happy to answer questions about that as well.
Great. Next up, one of the SVC UX certificate program graduates, Ariel Greene.
Thanks, Elly, and thanks, Larry, so much for having me tonight. So today is actually my 1-year anniversary as a content designer at Meta. When I joined the company, it was called Facebook. And I feel like Torrey said, I should also say I'm not here speaking on behalf of Meta tonight. Before Meta, I was, like Elly, I also was a UX writer at Nordstrom. And as she said, I graduated from the UX certificate program at SVC, which was a tremendous help in helping me make the transition from art museums and nonprofits. So really excited to be here with you all tonight. I only transitioned to UX writing like 2.5 years ago, so still fairly fresh.
Great. And we also have another SVC UX certificate program graduate, Chris Keimig.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chris. I am a content designer at MailChimp, graduate of SVC's UX certificate program in 2020. And before that, I had a background as a teacher. I taught high school English for a long time and did some like experiential education stuff, and had a brief stint as a journalist way back before that too. So happy to talk about how SVC sort of helped me make that pivot from my previous life to my current one too.
Great, thanks everybody. So just to give you a little bit of structure, like I said, we're going to talk about the field, and people can share all of the nuance of their job titles and their roles and responsibilities, and then get into more of the what is actually available for entry-level jobs out there, which I'm sure is of interest to this audience. And then again, how to present yourself, how to really think about the UX of applying for your entry-level content job. And then we'll leave lots of time for questions. So this will be a discussion among the panel, but we're making sure to leave lots of time so you can ask specific questions as we go on. So, all right, panel, I am just going to kind of throw some questions out there, and if you're super excited to speak on that topic, just start. So yeah, UX writer, content designer, content strategist. What does this mean, and what are some of the roles and responsibilities that go with it? How do you phrase this? Actually, I said everyone could just jump in. Scott, I know you've actually talked about this quite recently on LinkedIn, so I don't know if you wanted to kind of kick that off.
Yeah, well, that might be dangerous. So I have some pretty strong opinions on this, because I've worked in most of these roles in some capacity, and I think, maybe to start us off, I think my strongest opinion is that content strategy, and being a content strategist, which is my fundamentals course for SVC, second plug, is pretty fundamentally different than being a UX writer or a content designer. Content strategy in particular, I think, is the older term and an older discipline that has its foundations in website strategy and managing website content, typically for large enterprises. So content strategy is something that you'll find at all kinds of organizations, even ones that don't have a user experience team, that don't have a product team, that might not have a customer experience director. I've done content strategy engagements for orgs that for content that's wholly employee facing. So it's actually a massive world, and it is quite a bit different from content design. But I'll let someone else maybe talk a bit about the distinctions between content design, UX writing, or how those roles play out in their work.
I'm gonna build on that. I'm gonna yes and it. Content strategy is great big and came out of this website and managing. Actually, even before websites were a thing, people needed to do the management of technical documentation and books, and I mean, Microsoft Press existed. There's an awful lot there, and it goes very, very deep. And UX writing is a much younger field and tends to be doing different tasks day to day, whether it's called content design or UX writing. For me, that tends to be the difference between how the organization positions the different UX roles inside of it, right? Like where companies have product designers, they tend to have content designers as the parallel. Where companies like Google have UX designers, UX writer is a good parallel to that. So it puts people in the right category for that organization. Let me tell you, it doesn't translate organization to organization particularly well. So when people are talking about the differences there, like I will say, there are content strategy ways of thinking about sets of content, taxonomies across content, information architecture, management, governance, all of these things that UX writers and content designers need to do sometimes and need to build on in their work. But that's not the same thing as doing the writing of this button or this label. It's more, how do we strategize all of the buttons and labels so they work together as a beautiful set and all of that. That was a lot. I'll pass the baton.
Yeah, I can jump in a little bit. I like to say, like, a lot of times, yeah, they ask like, yeah, what is a content designer? What is a UX writer? And you really can just think of it like, we're all UX professionals. We just specialize in language, communication, words. It's not so much about like the what we're saying. We really are about like the so what, like the how, when, where, why. So really, like, even if you're not like in a role with those specific titles that we're throwing around here, content strategist, content designer, UX writer, like you can already start, you probably may already be like practicing those skills that really are like the foundation of like a content designer UX writing role.
One of the, if I could quick, one of the best pieces of advice I got, this is so early in my career, but like I just gotten laid off and I was doing, you know, I was really like a marketing writer at this app startup, but I was writing interface copy for an app and mini apps. And I was like, I talked to a friend. I was like, I'd like to keep doing this work. But like, I don't really know if like UX is what I'm doing or if I could like how to find my way in this. And I think this advice is maybe less relevant to UX people, but I think it's very relevant to content people now. And what he guided me towards was to look very carefully at the actual job descriptions. Because especially at the time in enterprise jobs, there are plenty of UX roles that might be categorized as, say, business analysis, or UX roles that were project management or product management or similar. And I think content design, content strategy, maybe less so UX writing, but certainly those first two, the doing the work does not require the title. Lots of the work gets done whether or not someone has the title. And so if you want to start doing this work and you're looking for these jobs, you have to look at what the job actually is. Because I've also conversely met plenty of UX designers who aren't doing UX design, but that's what their job title is. So you gotta look close.
Yeah. Related to that is, so I think one of the really key things, and personally, I think it's a little lost with the term content design, either here or there, is that it is about that user experience side of thing and partnering with your UX designer or product designer. Does anyone want to speak to the role of the product user UX design in UX writing? Maybe Chris or Ariel?
I'll start, I guess. I think, you know, like I feel like I heard this a bit from what Cortney was saying before, but I think of myself as like a user experience professional who focuses on language. So I think for me, like having the program at SVC was super helpful, the UX design program, because I can approach my job in content design with a really strong sense of UX. But I think that that's, for those of you who don't have that, I think it's something you can also kind of pick up on the job as long as you're open to it. So yeah, I'd say that's my experience.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I might have lost track of your original question, but I
about
kind
UX
of
design.
I kind of want, yeah. So I kind of wanted to echo and build off of a couple of things that I've heard from Ariel and others too. To what Torrey and Scott were saying, you know, to Scott's point in particular, I guess my first content design job was not a content design job. It was actually a design strategy job that sort of happened to be the role that matched my skill set and my background. And there was plenty of content design work to be done in that role. Some of it was part of the role, and some of it just needed to get done. And so I was there to do it. And that led me to like actually be able to parlay that into a proper content design title. I was hired as a UX content strategist. My title is now content designer. My job did not change at all. So like it is like when you're trying to parse the job listings, I think you really do have to read the description of the role and less so the title, because that's going to tell you much more about what the job is. And I would totally second what Ariel said. My approach to this work is very much as a UX professional who approaches the work through the lens of and brings an expertise in language and I try not to limit myself or to be too focused on my role as a writer and more as like a part of a design team.
Yeah. Just kind of wrap up talking about the field and the roles and the responsibilities on there. Is there any maybe like misconceptions you think people have that you'd like to clear up here, or anything you'd like, if you could tell somebody who, you know, one thing to make them really understand what UX writing or content design is about, do you have a thing you would say or have said?
Something I have said, if in case this is helpful, is I think UX writing in particular tends to mean that you're part of a UX team. So you can work independently as a UX writer, but there's a larger UX function. Like you're not going to be the only UX person if you're the UX writer. There's going to be other UX people. So within that larger framework, you're the person who cares the most about the words. So you could be doing 95% of the same things that people on your team are doing, participating in design ideation and research and testing things with users and winning over stakeholders, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it's more about like what your focus is on, is that you're deeply focused on meaning, message, words, et cetera, throughout that process. Which is not to say that it's a writing job. As I've often told people, like, if you have a really robust content design system and design system and a big copy deck, and you're in a very regulated, federated environment, finance, healthcare, whatever, where you just work for the kind of company who has their CEO has to go talk in front of the Senate pretty often, you are going to be pulling from a lot of pre-approved texts and so on. So it's more sort of like assembling and shepherding words through that process versus like, I'm going to type things today. That's a lot less of what the job is.
I think you reenacted the common misconception of our roles really well of I'm going to type things today. I think, yeah, that's probably number one misconception, is just essentially filling in the blanks. And I think all of us would agree that no one likes to get just amok with lorem ipsum or blanks at the end of the day.
Great. So we all have varying levels of expertise. So given all these skills and roles and responsibility, what's realistic for somebody who's looking for an entry-level job? What are some of the things you know about entry-level jobs that are out there, and what part of these roles and responsibility might be realistic for them? All right, start with anyone. Is anyone hiring? Is that their company? Do you have any openings or internships or any opportunities like that at your jobs?
I know that Google frequently has internships open. Well, it's a once a year cycle, and different teams have interns. And we do sometimes hire interns as ongoing professionals. I will say that at Google, we have very few UX writers. We're spread, it's not even that we're spread thin, it's that we are sort of nexus of content for entire products or features. So we don't have a lot of junior writers coming in. When I do mentoring and when I do teaching outside of it, though, I coach people, and there are a lot of jobs out there, but I definitely coach people to find a team that already exists instead of trying to invent UX writing at a company that's never seen it before. Because that means that you have to make all of your mistakes the first time in real time, and probably not even find out their mistakes for a few years because it works well enough. And then, yeah, but what you really want is to land somewhere that has a team, that has buddies, that has mentors, that can show you the ropes of the day-to-day, I thought I was just going to be typing a lot kind of life. And really the getting to know how at this company do people work in design teams, in product teams, in engineering teams, and develop those relationships and influence for good content and good user experiences.
Yeah, just to add to that, one thought is like, I think a lot of times when we're going after a new role, like even if you're like kind of seasoned and you're going after a new role, you can get caught up in just giving information, like you're the one presenting to these people, but really try to keep in mind it should be this two-way conversation. Like you don't want to land, like to Torrey's point, in a place where maybe you don't have anyone to like be a buddy or a mentor or someone to help you grow or be your ally. And that might not end well or make you feel so great. So I think like as you kind of start your search, it's not just like, yeah, definitely don't just look at the title, look at the job description, as Scott said. Think about who's there like to be around you and who will support you in your development as a UX writer, because there's like time is time, like it's going to pass, but you can learn so much more if you are set up in a like collaborative or, you know, compassionate environment. So just keep that in mind as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you think of like even related jobs that maybe somebody could start with and then transition once they're in the company that has UX writing or something like that? I know that when I was at Nordstrom, we had a lot of product copywriters. So their job was a little bit less of a strategic problem solving. It was very focused on, for this item, write the most engaging copy. And when I presented them on here, this is the UX writing guidelines, some of the people got really excited, took the SVC UX writing fundamentals class, and moved over from copywriting positions. And it was a really smooth transition. And it made it, even if as a hiring team, we weren't necessarily saying, oh yeah, we're looking for an entry-level person. We're like, oh, you've already got relevant knowledge. And I think that's something that's really important to consider. Does anyone else have thoughts or stories about relevant transitions?
Yeah, if I could add quick, like something that I think is a really important part of this conversation that I don't see us collectively as an industry talking about enough, is that there's a difference between entry level and junior level. So in product and tech companies, most of these roles have levels, and those levels are specific things that the company has that are tied to compensation level and expected like skill sets and responsibilities. So let's say you're a UX writer somewhere, you might have junior, mid, which is usually unlabeled, you know, senior staff, principal, whatever. So those are levels of being a UX writer at that company. Being a junior UX writer at that company may not, and in fact is probably not, an entry-level job. When people tell me like, I want to be a content strategist, it sounds, but they're like still in college, it sounds a little to me like a little kid saying, oh, I want to be an astronaut. Like, that's great, buddy. What are you going to do to get there? You're going to have to study a lot of math and science and work jobs close to where the astronauts train so you can learn how to become an astronaut, because there aren't any entry-level astronauts. Like, that's not a thing. And I don't think there certainly aren't entry-level content strategists. I think some of the bigger companies, thankfully, God bless them, are starting to do true internships and fellowships and apprenticeships where you can be like right out of school, get in there on the ground floor, grow your way up. But to your point, like I talk to content people constantly who are being told that they don't have any product experience, and they're trying to leapfrog directly into a mid or senior level role. And I tell them, like, you might have to take a step back and get any job in product, any job, customer support, technical writing, technical content, product marketing. Well, I don't want to do marketing anymore. Yeah, but product marketing is not marketing. At your real estate company where you do the newsletter, product marketing is product marketing. At a product company, that's product experience. So, you know, it's, I guess maybe to be the bearer of bad news, because people just don't seem to like to say this, like you might have to suck it up and take a job that is not your dream job to get to your dream job. That's a normal thing. That's a very normal thing. A lot of these jobs pay 6 figures or more. Some of them mid 6 figures, you know, once you get up into the very senior levels. It can be a long road to get there.
I want to add to that, and also let a little ray of sunshine through that cloud. It is absolutely true. Entry and junior level are not the same thing. And at the same time, all of us who've been doing it for doing UX writing or content design for more than 6 or 7 years, definitely got in without any UX writing experience, because there was no program. There was no, how do you get into it? So people were in tech writing, people were in help center writing. I was a teacher. It is a great entry point in. I will shut up. I see hands up.
Yeah, Chris, Ariel, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to talk a little bit about the transition and telling that story. For me, like, I felt like I looked at the job landscape and felt a little bit like Scott was describing, that like there's like, what is the way in for someone who is just out of school? I was making a transition to this field at the age of 35-ish. And so I was, you know, in this weird spot of like, I was kind of junior when it came to like working in tech or product or in UX, but I was not junior when it came to knowing how to get work done and function as part of a larger organization, right? So for me, I went to SVC's UX certificate program with the idea that I would do UX writing afterward. The content design program wasn't in existence then. But I had a sense of like, what is the story that I'm going to tell about myself at the end of this program? And how am I going to tell a story about how I'm not actually changing careers, but kind of building on my past experience? And for me, that was a really, really important part of being able to make the leap and being able to be in the room across from designers and like make a convincing case for why I could do what they were doing, you know, given a little bit of space and chance too. So that was really important for me. And you know, I was coming from the role of a teacher where the way I was working was exactly the way that UX professionals work. Like I had students, they had needs, they had goals, they were walking into a situation with preconceived ideas of, you know, what we were up to and how do I guide them to an outcome that is happy for both of us, right? So it was very, very parallel. It was just a matter of like being able to tell that story in a way that connects and that uses the language and the mental models of the design world too.
Yeah, to add to what Chris and everyone else has said, I just wanted to share like some of the ways that, and again, like Chris, I was, you know, not fresh out of college or anything. I was making a career transition, so brought that experience with me. But some of the ways that I some things I wanted to share with you all about how I, what I think made that successful in terms of applying. One thing is I applied for jobs even if I didn't meet the minimum requirements, which I think is good advice for everyone. And I think is particularly sometimes harder for women to do. So at Nordstrom, the job I applied for was not technically an entry-level role. And they ended up like actually changing the role to a more entry positions because they liked me and I wanted to work there. So you never know how these things will work out. And also, I don't know, I'm sure that Torrey doesn't remember saying this to me at an event, and apologize in advance if you didn't want me to share this, but I do remember you saying to me, it was just really important to apply really widely, like to get applications out there. Seems like you still stand by that. It was really helpful advice. I was resistant to that at the time, so that was helpful. And then one other thing, going back to what Chris was saying about relying on past experience, even though I'd never worked on a product team, it was really important to make sure that I had stories to share in interviews about, and in my portfolio about stakeholders. And that could be like Chris was saying, if you're a teacher with your students or other folks that you work with, or as you're building your portfolio and doing some work, like find any opportunities you can to get that feedback and interaction with stakeholders, because those are the kinds of stories I think that interviewers want to hear about.
Yeah, I can quickly add so I started as a technical writer in tech. Again, I also did the like widespread applications everywhere like approach. I was graduating with my master's in English rhetoric and like no one would hire me. I mean, I had like a job teaching English at at my college, which was great. But yeah, I really wanted to experience like what it meant to write professionally. And I grew up thinking, oh, I have to write books because that's what people do when they write for money, kind of. And so got in as a technical writer, but it was a leap of faith because I had no connections to Silicon Valley or the tech industry at all. And I just threw my application in and actually like took a wild guess, like, you know, LinkedIn stalked somebody and I said, I think you might be the hiring manager for this role I recently applied to. Here's like the 1, 2, 3 why you should hire me. And it was super tight and whatever. And he messaged me like 5 minutes later and was like, let's chat. And I got on a phone call with him and the rest is history. So like, take your chances. You never know. Like, just be open, be growth mindset. And yeah, I am, it's exciting.
Yeah, no, I think that is, oh, go ahead, Torrey.
That is an awesome story. That's exactly the right thing to do. And the idea of applying for all the jobs, and even for like the last, when I joined Google, I actually joined on a contract. I had been working in full-time roles. This was not like my entry into the career. This was not any of that. But I was, there were good reasons to leave the job I was in, and I was definitely looking. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. I didn't know it was a contract. And I talked to the people and I'm like, oh, but it's a contract. Do I want that? All of the relationships that go with that. And my husband quite rightly pointed out to me, like, this is something interesting that you could do now while you're unhappy and bored. And you could also look for a job while you're in this, because it's a contract, not a salary role, and just go for it. And that just go for it advice is like the bar for that job is it exciting and you're pretty sure you can do most of it or some of it at least, and you can learn other parts, but it like gives you a feeling of both anxiety and excitement. Go for it. Anyway.
I think this ties in really nicely to that, like, how do you prepare, you know, for the job search, and how do you present yourself? I'm going to speak, I'm a panelist here, about how much I wind up coaching people. Like, you are a trained, you're experienced professional. You understand, you're curious, you're motivated to understand what people need, what their time constraints are, all these things. And I notice that some people forget to apply that to their resumes and the job searching process. So I don't know if other people here agree with me that maybe is something that people could benefit from a little bit more, and kind of talk about what you look for in candidates, particularly ones who maybe have a little bit less work experience in the field exactly.
So I don't hire anyone, so I don't know how relevant my insights are, but I can tell you, like, I've done a lot of coaching calls with folks who are trying to do exactly that. Go from like what feels like no experience, no UX experience, no product experience, and move in. And something that I see a lot is that I think because of some nerves, imposter syndrome, maybe just being a little out of practice of going through this process, what you'll see a lot is there's almost too much focus on trying to prove how well you understand UX processes or like UX terminologies. There's like a lot of, so I'll have someone practice their case study presentation or whatever's in their portfolio, and they, maybe got to work on one project. And like, I look at these portfolios all the time where the description of the project and the case study is at best a general description of any given UX project in the entire universe, right? And I understand, because I've done this too, but like, I don't need someone to explain to me how a website redesign project works, because I have been through them. What you need to talk about, especially if you don't have as much experience, is you need to talk about you. Talk about you, what you like, what you care about, what you're interested in, how you think, how you approach collaboration. You have to lean on the things that are unique to you, because to an extent, that's all that you have. So the more, it seems counterintuitive. He's like, I don't have any experience, so I gotta like scrape and pull and like suck in like whatever passes as UX experience for this thing to even have a shot. And a lot of times those people are not successful because they're probably very interesting, well-rounded people who've been teachers and all kinds of other things, and like talk about things from that experience. You have to talk about that. So that's like, I guess that would be the number one for me. And what I see missing in portfolios, case studies, resumes all the time is like, I just look at it and I'm like, but where are you? Where are you in this?
Chris, Ariel, do you want to talk about like how you went through your job search not too long ago, and what you found like really worked, or maybe you tried and you realized it wasn't the right direction to go?
Well, interestingly, I was planning to go into UX design, but I found that I just like was a fit, I guess, for content. So I kind of rolled with that. So I think that's one thing I learned through the process is to like have ideas of what you want and where you want to go, but also be open to like discovering something that you weren't expecting. Yeah, I don't know. Chris, any thoughts from you?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I similarly, like, I would have loved to have, I mean, I did apply for some UX design jobs too, but like, I'm a writer for, like, I know where my expertise is, and like, partly you have to sort of identify your path and like where you can tell a good story. I would plus one some of what Scott was saying. I think the biggest question for a lot of folks coming out of a program like SVCs, or maybe even more of a slimmer program like a boot camp or something, is like, do these case studies that I'm doing as coursework actually count? Like, do they matter? Can I present something like this in a job interview? And in my experience, I would say, yes, they count, but they're not enough. That I, in my portfolio presentations, I led with my teaching, education, design work. Like, I told a good story about a really cool project that I actually executed and conceived of, and how I worked through it through the lens of a design project. And that was, I think, way more convincing and interesting for the people on the other side of the Zoom call than me talking about the case studies that I did as coursework, which I did also talk about too, but I didn't want to only talk about those things. So, you know, I've seen other people take sort of like volunteer gigs, and I know that there's many ways of thinking and endorsing or not doing work for free, but like, you know, at the end of the day, there were definitely jobs where the hiring manager liked me and I could tell that I was in the running, but like someone else is coming from Facebook and has been a product designer or a UX writer before. And so they felt safer going with that person, right? So if you can put forward something that feels like work that exists in the world, whether it is at a tech company or not, I think that matters.
Courtney, were you going to jump in on sort of how to tell that story, or what to prepare for different for hiring managers and job opportunities?
Oh, I was just kind of, a lot of what's been said here just had me thinking about like, yeah, how even there, if in those moments where you may feel like, oh, this is a competency based question, like not to feel like that knee-jerk reaction to just start regurgitating whatever UX stuff you've absorbed over the years, but really like keep it focused on you and how you would approach it and demonstrate your unique thinking about it. And just like, I think that's like the secret sauce. Like, are you demonstrating curiosity? Are you asking the right questions? Like, how do you arrive at that solution? Like, that's a heck of a lot interesting than just jumping straight to the solution. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on that.
I mean, I'm guessing we'll get some questions. We're already starting to see a little questions about this. Can we go a little bit deeper into like what that means for a portfolio, and what people might be trying to prepare, or what somebody who has been in part of an interview might be expecting to see?
Yeah, I want to answer that with a link from Jonathan Coleman. because there's a great article that he put out as part of HubSpot's blog. Actually, I will put it in the chat. And I have been I had documentation of here's what this looks like and here's what I'm looking for in a portfolio. And his article said all of the same things better and gave me more better ideas for how to do it. So I just point people to that now.
Yeah. One thing I was going to add that I folks have found this framing helpful. So if it's helpful to anyone on the call, I will share it again. Case study, I think, can be an intimidating term. It's like big consultancies would have full-time teams of people to write case studies for them to help them win multi-million-dollar projects. You're you, and you got a life, and you got kids, and you got a dog to walk, and all this stuff, right? So you got to pull something together. So I encourage people to think about work stories more so than case studies. So look at some work you've done. Tell me a little story about it. It could be a small part of a big project. It could be a small project. It could be planning a birthday party. It could be anything. It's my experience is that what's really hard to hire for are people who get it. And a slick portfolio with really detailed case studies doesn't actually show me whether or not you get it. And by get it, I mean, can you see content design work in anything that you've done? Can you see content strategy work in anything that you've done? In what ways were you user-centered? In what ways did you care about words, language, meaning? In what ways did you structure information to make it more understandable for people? Have you written an email to someone at your office that helped them understand something that they didn't understand before? Congratulations, that is content design. You can tell a work story about that and put it in your portfolio. You don't have to go spend lots of money or do a bunch of phony baloney challenges just to get screenshots. Tell a story that shows that you understand content design. If you don't understand content design, take one of SVC's many wonderful classes, learn content design. But you understand it, show someone that you understand it. That's what you're actually doing with case studies. It's not a game to create the most complicated case study that checks all the boxes. So all these questions that are very good about how many do I need and how long should they be and how many screenshots should they have doesn't matter, because that's not what you're trying to do. You're trying to show someone that you understand content design. That's the bad cop. What's the good cop version of that?
I don't know. I think that sounds like a good cop version of it to me. So yeah, it's one of the things I always say is like really thinking through. The hiring manager wants to be intrigued by you and wants to be excited by your curiosity and how you solve problems, and finding a story that can tell that. Because I'm sure many of you, I mean, the fact that you're here, you prove that you're already motivated and you're thinking about how do I do this better. I think it's just a really great starting point. So mapping this to then the job search. Do you have any advice you tend to give people about how to know if you're fit for any given job description?
I like to ask people, like when I look at people's resumes or give them feedback on their portfolios, I like to ask them, do you know what the impact is that you made with that, right? Like many people tend to write their resumes as a list of, I did these things. I verbed these nouns. I verbed the heck out of these nouns. I did that a lot. But if instead you say, I changed this metric at my work, even if that metric is, I engaged more people, I made the process easier for my team by doing this thing, by verbing that noun, right? You still want to have those, I did this thing in there. And when a hiring manager is writing that job description, they are thinking, oh God, I need these problems solved. How are the people, like what tasks are they going to do to solve my problems? So when you're looking at that, see if you can, and some job descriptions are not written well. Let's just put that out there. But you should be able to see a little bit into what is the problem I will be solving here? How is that like other problems I've solved, right? Because it will not be, I'm typing words right now. I'm gonna Figma and type and it'll be great. It's going to be, here's the problems I need to solve. And when you can tell that story to those hiring managers, say, oh, I think that you have these things going on and I can help you solve those problems. It's magic, right? And as somebody new to the field, nobody expects you to have your story all buttoned up, but letting them know, hey, I'm prepared to do things to solve problems. And I know that's why I would get money in exchange for words. Great. That's really the key there, in my mind.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm curious to hear from the panel is what information do you provide candidates or wish that they had maybe asked so they were better prepared? I think that's something that's evolving. Jonathan Coleman is another who's been trying to talk more about that, but what's a realistic expectation or something that a candidate could ask for to be better prepared? I can answer because I asked this question because it's something we do. We send our voice and tone out to writing candidates so that they can see like, yeah, that's a voice and tone I would want to write or not. And we try to be descriptive about who's going to be in the portfolio session, about how long it's going to be and what we're looking for. I think we could do even better than that. But I would feel that that is a reasonable thing to ask a recruiter for a position about like what it is they're looking for, what they're focusing on, and if there's anything that they offer to tell you how they already write there. So those are some of the things we've offered at CrowdStrike.
Yeah, I mean, you can ask for all kinds of things. I think, you know, some of the and sometimes the asking, I have personally, I've only been on a few hiring panels, but I find it impressive when people ask for more, like just the fact that they're asking for anything is like, oh, wow, they're like getting ready for this thing. They care. That's pretty cool. I think asking what you're going to be evaluated on, if they haven't specifically provided that, is a reasonable question. So just sort of knowing, like, you know, is there a framework or a metric? A lot of the bigger companies will have, you know, they may very well have explicit principles that are, it's their customer obsession principles or it's their corporate principles or whatever. And they, you know, they'll have whole pages of content about like what kind of people they hire. And very often those things go through some sort of HR meat grinder and turn into this rubric that everyone is asked to evaluate people against. So if they say that like creativity is one of their virtues in people, like there's going to be a box where like your creativity gets ranked 1 to 7 or whatever, which like sounds a little draconian and kind of is a little draconian, but like if you have to, I mean, if you're hiring thousands of people every year, like you got to do some kind of rubric. So I think having some sense of what those things are, and then if they're not clear to you, like asking for clarity on the definition or how they're understood ends up being really important, because a lot of times you'll get thrown into, you know, the hiring manager, they know what they're looking for. The fellow leveled people, you know, people have the same job title, they know what they're looking for. But a lot of times there's this squishy middle where you have like the cross-functional interview, and now all of a sudden you're talking to engineers and product managers and all these people who maybe have never even talked to a content strategist before, and they don't even know what to ask you. So they're going to like go off the question sheet and then go, oh, okay, pretty interesting. They sound like a 6 on creativity. So having that stuff in your head can really help.
I think that segues well into like just mentoring and other resources and networking and tools like that that you all have found helpful that might be helpful for our audience as well.
One thing I want to say is don't be afraid to reach out to people. I think it's really important to build that muscle. It's especially also weird right now as we're sort of coming out of the pandemic and like just getting used to like talking to people again in some ways. So we're all kind of like flexing those social muscles, but yeah, it never hurts. I mean, someone might say no, I guess, but you can always try, and you might be surprised. And I think it's just so helpful to like build up that support network wherever you find it, and take advantage of the opportunities that are in front of you. And yeah, doing as much networking, taking classes, all of these will contribute in the end to your goal of getting this job.
Yeah, that for me is where SVC was really, really helpful. I had moved to Seattle just before joining. I was changing industries. I didn't have much of a network locally or in tech. And so just sort of like providing that sort of authentic context to create those connections with people who are working in the industry was really, really important for me. I think both in terms of I mean, yes, like gaining connections, but also like giving me the confidence that the work I was doing was good enough and the right work, and that like I could confidently apply for these jobs that I felt that kind of imposter syndrome coming in. And those are relationships, many of them that like, before I interviewed with a couple of companies, I like ran through a presentation with one of my instructors. I've like stayed in touch with my UX writing instructor. I mean, like we're all the same age, right? So it's like, it's been nice keeping in touch with those folks too.
All right, Courtney.
I think, sorry.
Oh.
Your hand was up first, Torrey. Go for it.
Okay, thanks. I want to +1 to all of this networking and reaching out. I mean, people reach out to me all the time on LinkedIn. I have open office hours on Calendly, and a lot of people do, because it is really important that this field grows and thrives. And a lot of us are really invested in that. But even besides that, those conversations might not lead directly to a job, but what they will always do is help you practice talking the talk about the job and talking about what's important and formulating those ideas. And that practice is worth more than gold.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, I think like another approach, in addition to looking for mentors, like perhaps outside of wherever you may be working now, my guess is that a lot of you are working in some capacity. There may be people at your company or wherever you're working that are doing work that you might want to do, or looks a little bit more like the work you want to do. And I've always tried to like look for opportunities to work closer to those people, or even like talk with my manager and say, hey, can I do like a little like small or medium-sized project with that person like next quarter or something, just to get my feet wet or something, and or to shadow them even in their meetings and to hear what they do. So I think too, like it's not always you have to look like beyond your existing network. Sometimes you can really look within your own network and start growing from there.
I wanted to make a couple of requests quick while we're on this topic. So request 1, if you are reaching out to people, yes, please reach out to people. It's a very generous community. Ask specific questions. The busier the person, the more specific the question. If you are like, hey, I'm this kind of person, I'm looking at this kind of job, do you think that would be a good fit, right? Like something like that is like super easy for folks to respond to. I hope I don't sound too bitter, but like it's when you get so many, like any tips for getting started in UX writing, like, yes, here are my tips. I just gave them, watch this video, like rewind 1 hour. Those are my tips for getting started in UX writing. So like putting effort and energy into the questions, like is how you level up. That's how you build connections, because the people you're connecting with will see you as a thoughtful person who values their time. So be intentional about it. The other request I would have is that if someone does generously give you their time and you learn something, share it. Because as others have mentioned, this is very new and we're all growing and we're trying to build up a body of knowledge to scale our influence and help other people. So if you learn something, share it. Make a little LinkedIn post about it, put it on your own social media, do your own office hours in 2 years and pass it on to someone. But I worry that a lot of information is kind of getting lost in little coffee chats and office hours and not building up. So just a request, think about doing something with it if you learn something from someone.
Yeah, and I think that's a great call to kind of the other resources that are out there. Torrey mentioned that Jonathan Coleman has put things. There's definitely people who are providing this. And I think the more due diligence you can do to show your curiosity is actually going looking up some of this stuff and still following it up with conversations with other people. But doing the work first is also a really good example of how you'd be at a job that you would actually try to answer your question. I tell people asking questions is really important. And sometimes people are like, no stupid questions. I'm like, no, there are stupid questions. And that is when you haven't done any of the work. That is disrespectful of the person. So going through and doing some of that looking around before you talk to somebody is just makes you look really good and makes better use of your time. It's much more effective and efficient. So, yeah, there's so many books out there. Thank you to those who are making those get out the door. So we're going to move to Q&A in just a second, but I want to just kind of put it out there. Is there anything else, panelists, that you would add that's at top of mind? You know, Chris, Ariel, from your recent experiences in job searching and portfolio, and just what to keep an eye out for.
I see that Lily in the chat is plugging Torrey's book. I also wanted to plug Torrey's book. I recommend it to everyone who reaches out about wanting to get into the field. It's been super helpful.
Yeah. All right. Larry, I realize I didn't ask all the details about how to open this up. I know some questions have already come in. Should I go and find them, or just what have you found works best for
Well,
there?
I would say, everybody, there are already some questions in the chat. We'll go back and find them. Why don't I just read them to you? Would that make life easier?
That
And
sounds good.
then if you guys want to add some questions, we'll eventually get to them. How does that sound? Okay, hang on just a second here. Questions. Wendy asked this one, and I think it got answered in the chat. Does anyone know if there are still contract freelance UX opportunities? And Torrey and I, like, we had a mind meld and gave the same answer at the same time. But if any other panelists have an answer to that different from ours, which was Aquent, that would be good. And meanwhile, I'll go curate some other questions.
So I was just talking about this with someone this morning. So again, I'm just like Mr. Disambiguation today, but like contract and freelance can be very different. Contract roles, absolutely, all day long. Like they're, especially if it's a big company and they're hiring for lots of people. If you see a full-time job and they want to hire you on W-2 with benefits, but you're thinking like, oh, I'm transitioning, I'm trying to finish up my degree, or I don't know if I want to be in the office that often or whatever, like you might just reach out to them and say, could I do this 30 hours a week? Could I do this 20 hours a week? Could I do this on contract, try it out for 3 months? Like contracts are very common, very normal in this space. Sometimes you do those through agencies and recruiters. If you're a little more junior, if you're more established, it's pretty common to do it on your own. Freelance, I think, can be trickier, especially if you are just starting out, for UX writing and content design especially. Most of the people who I know do freelance in the sense of like they do a project, they run the project. It's mostly a solo operation. They're not part of a team. A lot of those folks tend to be content strategists, and they're a little further along in their careers, because that's more like a tactical kind of, not tactical, it's very strategic, it's right in the name, but it's like more segmented. Like, I'm going to come in, I'm going to tackle this one thing. I'm going to help you set the strategy for your new website. I'm going to help you prioritize audiences for your app. I'm going to help you audit content and get ready for this migration. Like, that's the kind of stuff that it tends to be easier to be like, here's a $5,000 project, here's a $10,000 project, whatever. That said, there are a lot of people freelancing in UX writing, and I'm eager to keep learning from them, because I think it's kind of a new thing that's growing
now. Thank you. This was a question that came in. A great one. What's the most important thing to do in your first 90 days as an entry-level content designer?
I think for me, I'm not sure if this is different from any other job, actually, my answer, but I think it's a great time to be asking a ton of questions. And like, I don't know, sometimes they call it like your noob or something, but you can say like, I have a noob question. This is the time when everyone else you work with will benefit from you bringing that fresh eyes, fresh perspective. And it's so important that not only for your own learning and growth, but also really to help everyone else on your team. Yeah, so I think that is really important. And also sort of hand in hand with that, to give yourself time to adjust to being part of this new world, and taking time to learn everything you can, not putting too much pressure on yourself, because that could go poorly for you. Just like giving yourself the benefit of the doubt, and being kind to yourself as you like take on all this new information.
I want to plus 100 that, because that, especially that being kind to yourself, like I've got a section in the book, which is a 30, 60, 90-day plan for starting a new content role. And I don't remember anything I put in it right now. But something that I've seen a lot lately is people at their between 6 to 10 weeks in a new role. And that is the absolute pits. That is, you have met everybody, you know about the problems. They are enormous. They are way more complex than you could possibly have known before you're in. And you are not sure you're up to the task. And everything is pretty confusing, and you're in it now, you're committed, right? That is like, I literally have talked to 3 or 4 people this week who have had that problem. And they're just like, yeah, the problems are really big, aren't they? And the important part is to breathe through that whole time, because those problems existed before you got there, and you are part of making it better, even if you don't see it yet. And it's going to be okay, but just expect that, and maybe warn your spouse. My spouse is always the one who tells me, like, oh yeah, you're right on schedule. You're right on schedule. You feel shitty right now. Oh, dang it, we're recording this and I'm swearing. Okay.
I think that transitions well to another question about kind of specific responsibilities that separate sort of the entry and mid-level roles from senior and lead roles. I think that speaks well to what somebody might need to do if they're, you know, sort of earlier in their UX writing career.
I want to jump right on this one too. The biggest differentiator I see is the ambiguity of the questions, or the ambiguity of the problems you're solving. Like, if you know that the problem is, we need people to come into the app and sign in, and you're making a great sign-in experience, or they need to buy a thing, they need to, there is a problem that's well scoped and a team working on it that understands it well. That role is perfect for somebody earlier in career. If it's, hey, we need to revamp how we do all of support because it turns out this isn't working for anybody with this data. Oh, crap. Right? This needs somebody more senior to come in and be able to represent the user and solve more ambiguous problems. I'd be interested to hear what other people are saying, are thinking.
I can offer just like my admittedly limited experience in this realm. To me, the difference between some of those entry level roles and senior and staff level is really like ambiguity, and I think comfort in talking strategy too, like the intersection of UX and business level strategy too, and that I think is like being comfortable with those conversations, and you know, being focused on meeting not only user needs but also business needs, and hopefully finding that happy place where those things intersect. That for me is a differentiator between those roles too.
I think it's interesting that a lot of folks coming in who have other work experience may find that junior or even mid-level isn't the right fit for them, even if they haven't worked in UX or product before, for that very reason, because of some of those more senior levels are more about collaboration, expectations and stakeholder management, change management, those sorts of things, and, you know, reframing bad questions or difficult questions, and redirecting difficult people. And those are all things you learn from years of experience in any knowledge work. And so you know, if you're out there and listening and you have a resume that goes back 5, 10, 15 years in whatever field, I would strongly encourage you, especially if communication has been part of that, writing, thinking about meaning and message, really look at some of the senior level positions. It might be a little bit of a harder nut to crack, but you may find more of a fit. You may find that talking about your strengths for those positions makes more sense. The latter is for people to start at, we call them ladders, but or levels, but it's like, you should start wherever you need to start, and you may find yourself starting at a senior level. And that's a normal and okay thing if you have, the other experience that backs it up. So I guess the short version of that is, don't feel like you have to start at the junior level, because not everyone does, especially if you have real world work experience as a knowledge worker dealing with people in business.
Yeah, and ask about the level too. Levels were totally new to me when I exited grad school. They gave me a number and then a salary attached to that number, and I was like, whoa, I was making nothing. So that was great, And looking back, I'm like, oh, I could have probably started a little bit higher, like whatever. So I think just be very just ask, what level would you be hiring for? What are levels there? What does that look like? What are the expectations for someone in that level in this role? Those are all fair game to ask during the interview process.
This one. And levels mean different things at different companies by a lot.
Yeah.
So also ask if you can talk to an interview champion or a most big companies have somebody attached to hiring who is just a regular manager or an IC who you can talk to about things and really ask them, so what is the deal with these levels? What does that even mean?
Yeah. So there's a question that had asked sort of about barriers that you've run into, when it's not a super straightforward career path or something. So I want to open that up for people, maybe Cortney or Torrey, about things that you've run into that maybe would have been that's been good to work, you've had to work through a little bit.
Sorry, what was the question? I'm looking for the question in the chat.
Oh, it scrolled up a little bit, but just sort of with this whole career progression, what are some barriers that people have run into? And did you work through them? Did you leave? If any stories that people might have around that.
Yeah, I think that in earlier days when I started my career, there were more barriers in tech as a woman in tech. Frankly, it was weirder to frequently the light in the ladies' bathroom would time out. It was always dark when I went in there. It was so notable when all 3 stalls were being used one day that we all commented on it. This is so amazing. 2 of the people are visiting that day, but still it was exciting. Now it is much, well, and I also worked at Xbox, which even before the days where even gaming got cleaned up quite a bit, which is very nice. There are very few barriers to women really succeeding now. I have seen, is there still bias? Yes. There are reports in the news about bias in companies, whether it's based on gender or based on ethnicity or based on all sorts of things. I don't think that that's unique to tech. I had a physics professor who wouldn't meet with women students back in the day because, it was a waste of his time. Things are so much better now. And there are allies and systems now in place where if those things do happen, there's usually some recourse.
Yeah, I think I'd call it, not to say that everywhere you go it's going to be equal, but I do think it's something to look for in a company as well. One of the things that I know that we're prepared for at my company and other places is that if somebody is worried that, everyone on the team, they're, a Black woman or something and want to say, is there somebody I can talk to who I think will give me a very real answer about how it is to interview here? And I think if companies find that really off-putting, then they probably haven't done the work. So one of the things to think about if you're running into barriers is how do you have an open conversation with that to know what the organization believes in? So that's one of the things I put up there.
And I will say that I've had that question in interviews from people yeah, but what's it really like? And I will be as real as I possibly can. And I think that that's a really important thing to do. And most of the women I know and men will give similar answers.
Yeah.
+1 to all of this, and it's okay to ask to do like reverse interviews, like request to interview folks like who at the company that you're working or that you're applying for. That's totally fair game as well. I know I talked to, I think, at least one mom when I was recently in the hiring process for FAIR, just to get her perspective on what is it like working there with like young ones running around. So like, yeah, questions like that are totally valid, and usually companies who are well prepared to like answer those things are more than happy to accommodate.
Yeah. So step one is you look up the company on Wikipedia. You scroll down to the controversies section. And then step two is you put their name into Business Insider and you search company name gossip or company name leak. I'm only half joking. And you search the company name on Twitter and you find communities where people are talking about it and you friggin' ask them about this stuff, right? Because you could be a big, email marketing company who has a huge cultural dust up and there's a lot of promises made, and then another even bigger company buys it and no one really follows through on those promises. Like there's things that are certainly a lot better, but like it is bad out there. It's very bad out there. There is bias and bullshit at scale in a lot of these big tech companies. And it is on us in part to ask how they're handling it. And their recruiters, ask politely, don't be like me, but ask politely, ask the recruiters about it, ask the employees about it, ask what it's really like inside, ask it in every interview, not just with the hiring manager, not just with the recruiting screener, but ask. And if you get contacted by someone and their values don't align with yours and you don't want to interview there, tell them that too. Let them know that because of this or because of that, I'm not going to be taking an interview there, because the reason things have changed is that people are holding them accountable. So it's definitely not time to celebrate, but the work is ongoing.
1 million to that. And because there were so many clouds there, I need more sunshine. Just as a personal need. I know this is me. This is not Scott. This is me. There's also an awful lot of good out there. And one of the most important things you can ask is of any of your interviewers and your recruiter, why are you there? Why do you stay there? And if they kind of hem and haw and are like, I don't know, you can tell immediately. And that is a really good signal. Like if everything else looks pretty good, but you're talking to the hiring manager, somebody on that team, and they're like, I'm really glad you asked that because reasons.
Yeah, you needed to pass the sniff. Yeah, you needed to pass the sniff test, because the thing no one will tell you with a straight face is I'm here because of the big fat salary. Right, like because that's gauche and we're not allowed to say that. But sometimes that's why people are there. And it's okay for some people to be there for that. You're going to find that in any company, even the most ethical ones on the planet. But if you get the feeling that everyone is there for that reason, you need to think about that for sure.
The question that I've got in here that I think relates this a little bit about how much do you need to do advocacy for UX writing in your roles, and how does that play out, and what should someone be aware of with that? So
I feel like I have to do advocacy in every role, and probably every time I switch teams, almost there's a level of advocacy that has to happen. And I think, it just varies. Like, for example, I was at Facebook years ago, now Meta, and there were a lot of decks already at my disposal to kind of like use, adapt, and like take on a roadshow or whatever. Now, like as I've gone to smaller companies, a lot of those resources don't exist, or they might be in process of existing. And so I think as a UX professional or UX writer or content designer, you have to be prepared to do some level of advocacy. And that might look like, just what is content design, at its current state in that company. It could be very different from content design elsewhere. You might have like lists of what we do and what we don't do, or here's what we do, here's what product marketing does, like laying it out in the most like clear and concise way as possible, just enough so your stakeholders know how to engage you. Because at the end of the day, like that's the point of these like resources is like, you want to work with these people and they just might not know how to work with you. So that giving them like the basics of how to engage with you as a content designer. And I know it can feel tiring and like in addition to everything else you're doing, but it really can go a long way. And once you start also just demonstrating your value, like people are going to want you in every room. And then it becomes another problem of figuring out how to manage your time. So yeah.
Another question we've got is about how to build a network if you don't already have contacts in tech. I don't know if some of the people who've transitioned more recently have thoughts on that. And Chris, you talked about it a little bit, but what are some suggestions for somebody who is I believe a stay-at-home mom and is ready to change things up?
I guess one thing is just that, like the networking opportunities. And then there are some like formal mentorship kind of programs you can sign up for. So I think those are good opportunities. Recently, someone reached out to me who, like I originally worked at the Met Museum and she is currently there. And so we had no connections in common, but like that, she was like, wow, like you were at the Met, now you're at Meta, like, how'd you get there? So that was just like a really natural, even though it was like, I didn't know this person at all and there's really no connection other than that. So maybe just like going through LinkedIn and kind of making those wild leaps is also.
Yeah, I would say for me, in addition to like SVC was great for me because it created that sort of authentic context for connection to happen. I'm someone who maybe just like doesn't like, I'm comfortable reaching out to people, but then I'm like, okay, so what next? How do we actually connect and like make this like a relationship? So for me, actually, I found like I started to look at interviewing as like one of my most powerful forms of networking, because there is that sort of context there. Like you are demonstrating, like showing your work, talking about your work, even if you're not the right fit, reach out, connect with them afterwards. If it went well, if it feels like they're, you know, that they at least like you were qualified for the job. The first job that I landed at a healthcare company out of the program was a job that I didn't get the first time. I was like one of the final two candidates, but then a few months later, I did get that job. You know, so because I reached out, I kept in touch. I said like, you know, so to me, like getting practice telling your story, getting in front of as many people who will listen to you as possible, you're going to get a lot of no's and you're going to get a you know, some silence too, but you're going to make connections that you won't otherwise make. So
I want to jump in with, sometimes it's very hard to reach out. Like I am not a good reacher outer. I feel really lucky, and somehow I got into this place where people reach out to me. So, that tank gets filled. But I find it much easier to engage through social media, right? There is a Slack group called Content and UX that is literally thousands of people discussing these kinds of problems all the time. It's a great online community to just start lurking in, asking questions, learning from. Great things are posted in there all the time. And there's plenty of content designers and content strategists and people with opinions about UX on Twitter, for example, and on LinkedIn, right? Follow the people who are talking, and you will build that network.
I'll put a plug in for some of the conferences. Not all of them are, you know, they're wide range of cost and experience and all of that. But I know like Brain Traffic, which puts on Confab, and Button have equity scholarships or volunteer opportunities. So there sometimes can be like lower barrier entryways to be a part of those communities. And that can be a fabulous way to meet like-minded people. So just want to put that out there. We are nearing our close. Let's see. I think do people want to do just a quick recap of one of the things, like your one nugget of advice you give to people who are looking to transition into this field? We'll go and people are. I don't have to make you say it, but
I don't know if it's a nugget. I think there was a question around like soft skills at some point too. I saw in the chat. I think we mentioned a lot of them. I know Scott and a few others talked about like communication, facilitation, creativity, curiosity. There's so many things that I think can translate into this job. That is probably what you'll be doing like most of the time. Like the words are really the byproduct of all of those things. So the more that you can like practice those softer skills and then communicate how that like got you to what you're showing will be super helpful.
Yeah, SVC, as part of their certificate program, offers a class focused specifically on those skills. I often don't call them soft skills. I think they're pretty core skills. But yeah, it's, some of that advocacy stuff we were talking about and the persuasion and the demonstrating value. All of that is so essential to your storytelling, and also understanding what your users, what your hiring manager, what your team is looking for. So I think they're essential.
Yeah, I actually love the point about soft skills. I actually am trying to get in the habit of calling them human skills because I think that's a much better label for them. There's also, if you just Google like Figma skill mapping, there's a really cool exercise that you can see that the Figma UX design team did where they identified like various skills, both hard and soft, to be like quote unquote successful in a design role there. And it's a fun exercise I've used in other roles as well. So it can be fun just to like map yourself to like various skills and see what you might want to grow and what might already be pretty refined.
I would, I guess my final thought, my nugget is like, I would implore people, encourage people, I'm trying to be encouraging, like keep caring about the work, keep caring about what content design is and what content strategy is. And learning is not everything, but at once, but continuing to learn, because all these tips and tricks and hacks and networking things and all this stuff about how to get the job, like that's kind of icing on a cake. And the what is the other part of the cake? The cake of the cake, the cake of the cake is the work and caring about this and understanding what it is. And if you are passionate about continuing to learn, if you're looking at a conference as a way to learn, not a way to network, if you're looking at the people in this field as people to learn from, not people to connect to or add to your LinkedIn network, if you are learning, those dots start to connect themselves. So if you care about this, and I don't care if you care about it because this stuff can be boring sometimes, but if you care about it, keep caring about it, follow that path. And as you need career advice, dip your head in those waters, but otherwise, keep focusing on the work.
I think I want to add to Scott's message of keep going with a slightly different twist of like, reflecting back on where I was when I was on this journey of looking to get into this field. I doubted myself a lot, and I imagine that some of you might feel that way too. It's a tough field to break into, and I think it's hard to like know exactly what are the right things to do and how to make it work, and whether you're even on the right path. So I think my encouragement to anyone who's like in this room or is interested in this is just to keep going, trust yourself. You have something to bring to this field, and whatever experience you've had before, there is always some connection that you'll find, even if it takes you a while to kind of like massage that story and figure out the connection points. So yeah, just keep going.
Yeah, I would add to that. I think there's been some talk about like I know for me going through the job search and trying to break into the industry, I think I to some extent felt hung up on like, am I demonstrating the process correctly? Am I doing it right? Did I follow the steps right? And for me, this is connected to the content, to advocating for content design too. What hiring managers, in my experience, are looking for is someone who is going to identify and solve problems and make an impact. If the way you do that is through content design, then great. But what they're really looking for is someone who's going to solve their problems. And so if you can demonstrate how you've done that in adjacent spaces with words, ideally, like that is a really compelling story for hiring managers. And it's not necessarily all of the like tricks and terms that we couch the work in too.
I'm reflecting that we haven't talked very much in this about why we get into it. And I will end with my my nugget is about I get to have a job where I work on fundamental experiences that humans have literally around the planet that affect billions of people. Now, not every company works at Google scale. Not every company should. Oh my God, it's overwhelming. But I get to make people's lives a little easier and a little better using some of the basic tools they have to get through their day. And that is an awesome responsibility and a treat. And I get to wear my heart on my sleeve all day long and be like, center on that user, center on how are we helping people do the things they're here to do, while we're also making it good for the business because somebody's got to pay our salaries. And you know, connecting those dots. So why I get into it has kept me in the field and has made me more valuable in the field, because I can, if I keep focused on what it is I'm trying to accomplish, then all of those new skills I need to learn, right? Like I definitely didn't know Figma when I started, it didn't exist. So I've learned all of this on the job, and yeah, I'm still in it.
All right, we are at time. I know some of you have stayed, we've stayed a little past time, and thank you so much, audience, for your time. It's so great that you are curious about this and looking to keep getting better at what you can offer and what you can learn. Thank you so much to the panelists for sharing all of your experience, and to Larry for making this all possible. I know there's some links that have been showing up about all the other resources that are available from SVC. So if you want to take us out with that.
I just want to say, I'm just feeling so much, this sounds corny, but it's true. I'm just feeling so much love for our students, for our instructors, for anybody that shows an interest in this kind of work. It's just, it really is very heartening, because this is good stuff. This is making the world better. So if you would please put massive amounts of love right into the chat right now for our panelists and for Elly for leading us through this. We've sat through a few of these over the years, and this truly was perhaps the best one that I've ever been a part of. So thanks to everybody. Panelists, thank you so much. And audience, thank you so much. Hope that we will get a chance to see you again.
Yeah, best of luck to all of you.